You know, when we think of ancient Egypt, a few things probably pop into your head right away. Pyramids, mummies, all-powerful pharaohs. It's a world that feels so familiar. But what if I told you that the iconic image we all have, it's often completely misunderstood?
I mean, take this scene right here. It's the classic, right? Camels looking all majestic in front of the pyramids at Giza. You've seen it on postcards, you've seen it in movies. It basically is the mental picture of ancient Egypt for most of us. But here's the thing. This image is actually all wrong.
Yeah, believe it or not, the ship of the desert didn't really show up in Egypt until much, much later. And look, that might seem like a tiny detail, but it points to a much bigger idea. Our modern picture of Egypt is built on a lot of myths. So today, we're going to dig past all that and uncover the real 4,000-year-old blueprint that built one of the greatest civilizations on Earth and, in the end, helped tear it down.
So to really get Egypt, you have to understand this blueprint I'm talking about. These were the core ideas, the DNA of their society, and they were hammered out over thousands of years before there was even a pharaoh. This was about building a culture that could literally last for millennia. Okay, let's rewind the clock, way back. For thousands of years, the land we call Egypt was actually a lush green savanna. You can see it in these ancient carvings of wild cattle. But then, around 10,000 BC, the climate starts to change, and all that green grassland begins turning into the massive desert we know today. And that intense environmental pressure, it was a game changer. It forced everyone to huddle around the only thing that could sustain them, the Nile River. This incredible concentration of people kicked off a wave of innovation. By 7000 BC, they're building stone calendars to predict the floods. They're inventing writing, not for epic poems, but for something way more practical, collecting taxes. And this all leads to a single moment, around 3100 BC, when a powerful southern king named Narmer conquers the north, violently uniting the two lands and creating the world's very first nation-state.
And with that one act of unification, the blueprint was set. It's this powerful mix of four core ideas that became the absolute bedrock of their entire world for the next 3,000 years.
So what are these four pillars? Well, first, you have the Nile. It was everything. Its predictable annual flood brought life and order to their entire world. Second, this deep, profound belief in the afterlife. For them, death wasn't the end. No way. It was just a transition, and your body had to be preserved so you could live forever. Third, the gods. We're talking hundreds of them, each one controlling some aspect of a very chaotic universe. And finally, the pillar holding the whole thing up, the God King. The pharaoh wasn't just a ruler, he was a living god on earth. The only guy who could talk to the other gods and make sure the sun rose and the Nile flooded. This blueprint created this incredible sense of stability and purpose. And for the next 500 years, during what we call the Old Kingdom, the Egyptians just ran with this blueprint. They executed it with this absolute, unwavering confidence. This was the age of the pyramid builders, a time of just breathtaking ambition.
And when I say ambition, I mean the scale of it was just staggering. The Great Pyramid of King Khufu, it was built from 2.3 million massive blocks of limestone. I mean, think about that. It was the tallest thing on the planet for almost 4,000 years. Pulling that off requires a level of organization that's almost impossible to wrap your head around.
And you can forget the idea that this was built by slaves. That's a Hollywood myth. Archaeologists have actually uncovered an entire city built just for the workers, housing over 20,000 of them. And these were skilled, government-paid professionals. They had bakeries, medical care, they were well-fed. This was a massive state project. It shows you what Egypt was at this point. A perfectly oiled machine, a unified society, all working for their god king.
But this age of perfection, this incredible stability, it came to a sudden and absolutely catastrophic end. After centuries, the blueprint shattered. The very thing their entire world was built on, the Nile, it failed them.
For years, the annual floods just stopped. The country dried up, the crops failed, and society collapsed into starvation and total chaos. We know how bad it was because a local warlord named Antifi carved the horrifying truth into his own tomb. He wrote that the famine got so terrible that every single man is eating his children. It is just a shocking, horrifying look at how completely their world fell apart.
The God King's authority, it just evaporated. That perfectly oiled machine broke down completely. Egypt just splintered. In place of a unified nation, you had civil war. And instead of massive state projects for the pharaoh, you had egomaniac warlords fighting over scraps and building tombs to boast about themselves.
So after more than 100 years of this chaos, a powerful family of warlords from the southern city of Thebes manages to fight its way to the top and reunite the country by force. But that experience, that dark age, it left a permanent scar on the Egyptian psyche. They never, ever forgot it. This new, reunited Egypt was defined by fear, by suspicion. That absolute confidence of the pyramid builders was gone, replaced by this deep-seated anxiety. And so, pharaohs like Senusret III ruled with an iron fist, and they projected that fear outwards. They launched these brutal military campaigns into Nubia to control its gold, and they built a string of massive fortresses on the border, not just for defense, but to intimidate everyone around them. Egypt was becoming a military state.
And that new military mindset got put to the test big time. A group of foreign traders from Palestine, known as the Hyksos, they saw the weakness in Egypt and seized control of the entire northern half of the country. But this crisis, it turned into a catalyst. The Egyptians basically learned from their conquerors. They copied their advanced military tech, the powerful composite bow, the fast war chariot, and armed with these new weapons, they not only drove the Hyksos out, they kept right on going. And that victory, that's what launches the new kingdom, Egypt's age of empire. This is when they become richer and more powerful than ever before.
But here is the great paradox. The very blueprint that had created all this stability and incredible wealth, well, it started to sow the seeds of its own destruction. Egypt's success turned it into the ultimate prize, and its own core beliefs began to rot from the inside out.
So as Egypt built its empire, just unimaginable wealth, gold, silver, tribute from conquered lands, it all poured back into the country. And a huge chunk of that wealth was dedicated to the gods, especially the state god Amun at the massive temple of Karnak. Over the centuries, the priests of this temple became so rich and so powerful that they started to rival the authority of the pharaoh himself.
And the depth of this corruption is just stunning. We have actual papyrus letters from the time that reveal a shocking truth. To fund their own power grabs, the high priests of Amun were running a state-sanctioned tomb-robbing operation. I mean, they were sending in teams to systematically loot the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings, the sacred resting places of legends like Ramesses the Great. They unwrapped the mummies, stripped them of every last piece of gold, and then just rewrapped the bodies and hid them in secret mass graves. The central belief of their entire civilization, the divine afterlife of the king, was being sold off for cash and power.
A divided and corrupt Egypt was now an irresistible prize, and for the next 1,000 years, it was basically a revolving door of conquerors. First, it was Libyan generals, then Kushite kings from Nubia came up, and ironically, they said they were invading to restore traditional Egyptian values. They were followed by the brutal Assyrians, then the Persians, and finally Alexander the Great. And what's so wild is that most of these invaders didn't try to destroy Egyptian culture. They did the opposite. They adopted it. They had themselves crowned pharaoh and ruled using the same ancient blueprint.
And that leaves us with this one last, pretty mind-bending question. The very blueprint that gave Egypt its identity, its stability, its power for 3,000 years, did it create a culture so alluring, so powerful, that it became its own greatest vulnerability? Was it a blueprint so perfect, so irresistible, that in the end, everyone wanted to claim it as their own, until the people who invented it were no longer in control?